Hello, RotoBallers. I'm Donnelly, and this is your fantasy football starts and sits for week number 10 at the tight end position. Now, this video is being recorded on Monday, so plenty can still happen between now and Sunday's kickoffs. So check out RotoBaller.com and the RotoBaller Discord channel for all the latest fantasy football news. Now let's get at it here. Let's talk about Dalton Schultz versus the Cincinnati Bengals. I am piggybacking off of what I believe is going to be a shootout in Cincinnati and off of CJ Stroud's right arm here in week number 10. We know Stroud will want to be at his best as he goes head-to-head with Joe Burrow this week. And one area in which the Texans offense can exploit this Bengals defense is with Dalton Schultz. The Bengals are among the 5 friendliest fantasy defenses when it comes to tight ends, allowing more than 15 fantasy points per game. Last week, Stroud spread the ball around nicely, including 11 targets to his tight end, who turned those opportunities into 10 catches, 130 yards, and over 27 fantasy points. Fantasy, it can be frustrating, but it can also be predictive, people. A good offense with a good tight end against a defense that struggles at defending the tight end means said tight end is a must start. Speaking of must starts, let's keep it going here with Dalton Kincaid versus the Denver Broncos. Yes, another great start, not only this week, but the rest of the season. And despite a fumble last week in that contest against the Bengals, Kincaid still had 16 fantasy points thanks to his 10 grabs for 81 yards. The rookie tight end sits second on the Bills in receptions with 40 and has seen 7 or more targets in 3 straight contests. All that since Dawson Knox went down. He also has earned a 22% target share and ran a route on 82% of Josh Allen's dropbacks over that time. This week, Kincaid faces a Broncos team that is allowing more than 70 yards per game to tight ends while allowing more than 6 receptions per game. For most of the season, you have been able to start your quarterbacks, your wide receivers, your running backs, and yes, your tight ends against the Denver Broncos, who have allowed more than 15 fantasy points per game to the position. How about one more tight end? Michael Mayer of the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the New York Jets. New York comes into this week's contest allowing more touchdowns to the tight end position than any other team. Not to mention they are allowing more than 13 fantasy points per game and sit inside the top 10 for fantasy points allowed to the position through 9 weeks. If you lost Dallas Goedert to injury this week, or you're looking for a replacement for Travis Kelce, then Mayer could be a nice streaming option this week. Now, contrary to what the box score showed last week, Mayer is going to be a bigger part of this Raiders offense this week. He's going to have to be. He really is, because this is one area in which the Raiders can look to take advantage of this Jets team and move the ball. As we all sit there and we watch Sauce Gardner versus Devontae Adams, Mayer could quietly put together a very nice fantasy performance. As a bonus, keep your eye on Kyler Murray this week. If he finds his way into this Cardinals starting lineup, then Trey McBride becomes a must start this week against the 10th worst fantasy defense against the tight end position. If it's Clayton Tune back under center, you know what? Forget you even saw this video here. Having Kyle Pitts in your fantasy life is like a fantasy toxic relationship. Are you left feeling unhappy? How about feeling a lack of support? Do you feel somewhat disrespected? If you answered yes to any of those questions, it may be time to simply move on. This week, he faces a Cardinals defense that is allowing less than 9 fantasy points per game to the position, and they've allowed just 2 touchdowns and 352 receiving yards thus far this season. Jonnu Smith has seen more targets inside the 20-yard line than Kyle Pitts has this season. Not to mention, Jonnu Smith has more receiving yards and touchdowns. Not only is this a tough matchup, but it's also compounded here by the fact that Arthur Smith is like fantasy kryptonite. Another sit this week is David Njoku versus Baltimore. I'm also not too big on Mark Andrews against Browns, but I will focus my negativity here on Njoku because the Ravens' ability to get after the quarterback. When these two teams met earlier on the season, the Ravens forced Dorian Thompson-Robinson into 3 interceptions and sacked him 4 times. While Watson isn't to be confused with Thompson-Robinson, that Ravens pressure, it is real, and I would expect the Browns to try and protect Watson at every possible cost, and that cost could be to Njoku's fantasy value. He may be asked to block more than what he normally would do. Now, to the rookie's credit there, in that contest in week 4, he did find Njoku there 6 times for 46 yards, but I do not see Cleveland wanting to risk another shot to Watson's shoulder this week. My last sit this week is Luke Musgrave versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. The good news for Packers fans, Aaron Jones was finally productive last week, which means this Packers offense could be trending upward. The bad news, Pittsburgh is a tough matchup for tight ends this season. Last week, they held Chigakonkwo to 3 catches and 28 yards. On the season, they are allowing roughly 40 yards per game and less than 9 fantasy points to the position on a per game basis, and which happens to make them one of the top 5 fantasy units at defending tight ends. More impressively, they've only allowed 1 touchdown to a tight end through 8 contests. Here are the tight ends you should be starting and sitting in week number 10. Start Dalton Schultz versus Cincinnati. CJ Stroud and Dalton Schultz connection was on full display last week, and this week they have a top 5 matchup. Dalton Kincaid is a start versus Denver. Unless it's snowing or your quarterback has the flu or Taylor Swift can't be at the game, you start everybody versus Denver. Start Michael Mayer versus the Jets. Vegas will have a difficult time passing on this Jets secondary, but the Jets are very friendly towards tight ends. Sit Kyle Pitts versus Arizona. He's like a fantasy band-aid, not due to injuries, but because you need to rip him off your roster, especially in this difficult matchup. Sit David Njoku there versus Baltimore in another difficult matchup. Njoku may be asked to block more than normal to protect their quarterback. And sit Luke Musgrave versus Pittsburgh. The Packers offense isn't there yet, and this is a bad matchup for the rookie. Now be sure to like and subscribe to our RotoBaller YouTube channel for plenty more fantasy football analysis.